Date: 2017. Target: Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. Location: the Ecuadorian Embassy in London. Objective: killer capture. Origins of this order: from quote the highest levels end quote of the US government and CIA. Normally a target like Assange would be easy. Grab him from his way home from work, or shoot him as he walks to get his morning coffee. The only problem was Assange did none of these things. He hadn't done any of those things in years. For 5 years, Julian Assange had been hiding in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Killing him there or sending in the police would go against international law and be a foreign relations disaster, so the CIA had to concoct another plan. First, they discussed secretly kidnapping him from the embassy and bringing him back to America, but that would make it too obvious America broke the law, so they changed tactics. Kidnap him, turn him over to the British, that way no one would know who was behind it then, right? But then there was still the chance he wouldn't get extradited back to the US if the British police got him. Eventually, they got so desperate that they had no choice. They discussed the unthinkable.
Did the CIA plot and plan to kill Julian Assange?
Well, unthinkable for everyone else, very thinkable for the CIA. Going against every international law, they contemplated assassinating Julian Assange in the embassy where he lived. Poison, snipers, sending in assassins, nothing was off the table. But then came another variable the US didn't plan for: the Russians. Realizing the CIA would want to get rid of Assange, they decided to do the opposite. They would help him escape to Mother Russia. After all, the Russians didn't grant Edward Snowden asylum out of the goodness of their hearts, but because it was a great way to humiliate the US. Doing the same for Assange would be another great victory. The CIA finds out about the Russians' plans, so they scrap their killer capture plans, and now have to brainstorm how they would intercept a Russian extraction. If the Russians were gonna help him escape by car, the CIA would crash into it with their own vehicle, then grabbing him, while prepared for a firefight in the process in the middle of London. If the Russians were going to fly him out, they would get the British police to shoot out the plane's wheels before it could take off to Moscow. The US, UK, and Russian intelligences were in a race to see who would get to Julian Assange first. Quote, it got to the point where every human being in a 3-block radius of the embassy in London was working for one of the intelligence services, whether they were street sweepers, or police officers, or security guards, end quote. The question is, why? Why was this one man so feared by the US government that they were quote completely detached from reality, that they were concocting plans to kidnap or assassinate him within a foreign embassy in a foreign country? What does it take to get to the top of the CIA's hit list? I'm only asking for a friend.
Julian Assange, founder of WikiLeaks, has been arrested in London.
Founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, is finding out
London
that he'll be
police
extradited
have
to the
arrested
United
WikiLeaks
States.
founder Julian Assange. Here you can see him being dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy by British police.
Even if you're not on a killer capture list and you're not doing anything illegal, having all your browsing history logged and linked to you by your internet provider so it's available to governments and hackers is probably not a good idea. That's where Private Internet Access comes in, or PIA. Private Internet Access is the world's leading no-log VPN provider. A VPN, or virtual private network, basically reroutes all your internet traffic through VPN servers all over the world. This makes sure your IP address is completely hidden, and it allows for some cool hacks like watching geo-restricted Netflix content. PIA is ridiculously easy to use, has over 30 million downloads with 24/7 live customer support, and it's at an extremely affordable price point. It's recommended in Forbes, PC Magazine, Lifehacker, and more, and it's today's video sponsor. Here's how it works. You sign up and download the PIA app on your phone or laptop. Once you open up the app, you can switch your location to almost anywhere in the world, and boom, you're protected and you can access geo-restricted content on streaming platforms like Netflix. Simply go to a site like unogs.com, search for a movie you want, see what countries it's available in, connect to one of those countries in the VPN, hit refresh, and there you go. And for a limited time, Private Internet Access is giving you guys 2 years plus 3 months free for just $2.08 a month, with a 30-day money-back guarantee so you have nothing to lose. So protect yourself by pausing the video and clicking the link in the video description below to claim this very affordable offer right now. Julian Assange was born in Australia in 1971, and by just 16 years old, he was already a hacker. Under the codename Mendax, Assange broke into some pretty huge organizations. What does the Pentagon, the US Department of Defense, NASA, Panasonic, and Lockheed Martin all have in common? They were all hacked by Assange when he was just a teenager. Needless to say, he was a child prodigy, the kind of person you'd only expect to see in movies. That was until 1991, when Assange got caught trying to hack into a Canadian telecommunications company at the age of 20. He spent 2 years in jail and was released in 1993 on good behavior, after agreeing to use his skills to help the Australian police. From then on, he led a pretty quiet life. He took some classes at the University of Melbourne, and then in 1999, he registers the domain leaks.org. But this domain will remain unused for another 7 years until 2006, when he started the organization that would make him one of the most feared men by almost every global superpower. WikiLeaks changed the game. When it launched in 2006, it was like nothing the world had ever seen before. Anyone with any important information or proof of classified secrets could submit their data to WikiLeaks anonymously, something that was not very common back then. It worked like a really big Dropbox, but instead of sharing pictures from family holidays, you could share top secret information with the publishers. They would sort through the info, decide if it was important enough to publish, and then they would pass it on to huge news agencies like The Guardian or The New York Times. What made WikiLeaks different from other whistleblower organizations is that they could never really be charged with stealing information. They didn't do any of the hacking themselves, so to a certain extent, they were innocent, which led to one other major advantage WikiLeaks had. Since they weren't involved in stealing the information, the classified documents they published could be used in court. This was a game changer and terrifying for powerful people with dark secrets to hide. Because if the whistleblowers had published the leaks themselves, US law would make it impossible to use that illegally obtained evidence to prosecute people or governments. But because WikiLeaks kept their hands cleaned, the data they published could be used in any court in the US. At first, the group didn't gain much recognition. They leaked the US handbook for the treatment of prisoners at Guantanamo Bay in 2007, and in 2009, they posted more than 500,000 pages of messages sent on 9/11. But nothing quite caught the government or the public's attention, at least not until 2010. In April 2010, WikiLeaks releases this video. It's a simple, low-quality video from an Apache helicopter involved in a Baghdad airstrike on July 12, 2007. Parts of the video unfortunately have to be censored for the YouTube algorithm. It's available uncensored if you want to search for it yourself. This video was an airstrike that killed 18 people. Pretty standard stuff for the US military. What was strange, however, was that for a group of armed insurgents, they seemed to be walking around rather calmly, while a loud, heavily armed, unmistakably Western Apache helicopter was roaming above. But rest assured, the US military promised us that, quote, "There is no question that coalition forces were clearly engaged in combat operations against a hostile force."
Move along, there's nothing to see here!
But Reuters weren't happy with that answer, so they filed a Freedom of Information Act to request a copy of a video of the engagement, but to no avail. That was until the encrypted footage made its way to WikiLeaks. They decrypted it, titled the video Collateral Murder, published it, and this is what it revealed. These were not enemy insurgents, hostile forces that the US military shot up, but two unarmed photographers for the news agency Reuters, Namir Noor Eldin and his driver Sahid Chama. The pilots mistook their cameras for weapons, and a myriad of other casualties that didn't have any weapons or seemed to be hostile at all. The US military just tried to cover up friendly fire on journalists, and almost instantly, the video was spread to every newspaper and online publication around the world.
Of course, our top story this morning, the White House blasting the release of over 90,000 U.S. military records on the war in Afghanistan.
WikiLeaks.org, a whistleblower website, has published what it says are nearly 92,000 official U.S. documents of raw data on the deaths and casualties collected over the past 6 years.
The WikiLeaks website released nearly 400,000 secret U.S. files on the Iraq war late today. It was the largest leak of classified U.S. files in history.
Everyone came to know the name WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. Everyone, including the US government. And they were not happy. The Pentagon called WikiLeaks a national security threat. The person who leaked the video, Chelsea Manning, got caught, not because of WikiLeaks. She was arrested for leaking the video and thousands of other classified documents to the organization. They tried to block off WikiLeaks' funding, but the organization just moved to Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, they couldn't arrest Assange for publishing the video since he had no involvement in stealing it. But just a few months after leaking the most embarrassing clip against the US government in recent memory, Julian Assange was accused of a crime. A crime that would conveniently discredit him, discredit WikiLeaks, and discredit any other leaks they would publish in the future. In August 2010, Julian Assange visited Sweden to get support for WikiLeaks. After the collateral murder video, he was obviously not comfortable with what the US would do as revenge, and he hoped Sweden would offer him and WikiLeaks some protection. Except 3 months later, Swedish police issued an arrest warrant for Assange. They accused him of sexually assaulting 2 women on his visit to Sweden. By the time the warrant came out, he was in the United Kingdom. Even though Assange gave himself up to the British police in December, he still insisted that he was innocent, and he was released on bail. And he had his suspicions. Wasn't it a little too convenient that just as WikiLeaks rocked the world with the collateral murder video, Swedish police accused him of committing a crime that would discredit his character, his organization, and any information he shared up to that point? At least that's what Assange believed. He spoke of Sweden's quote, very poor judicial system, end quote, weakened by external political meddling, careerism, and a culture of quote, crazed radical feminist ideology, end quote. The only problem with his argument was that Swedish law prohibits extraditions for political crimes, including espionage and for cases eligible for the death penalty, something that Assange was sure the US would work around. With the cards stacked against him, Julian Assange knew that he would have to act quickly to save himself from getting extradited to Sweden. If he was put in jail, in his mind, there was no doubt the US would find a way to extradite him back to the US for whatever crimes they would charge him with soon. And on May 30th, 2012, the Supreme Court ruled Assange would be extradited to Sweden to stand trial for the accusations. The only problem was, no one knew where Assange was. He'd been cut out on bail for the whole trial, but after the Supreme Court ruling, he seemed to have disappeared into thin air. He hadn't left the country, the British government was sure of that, but where could he have gone? No one would find out until it was too late. At the moment, he was at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, negotiating being given asylum by their government. On August 16, 2012, the Foreign Minister of Ecuador announced that Julian Assange had been given asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy in London.
We trust that the United Kingdom will offer as soon as possible the guarantee for the safe passage for this asylum of Mr. Assange, and that they will respect those international agreements that they have signed in the past and that they have always respected.
A tiny office in the embassy was converted into a studio, with a bed, shower, treadmill, kitchenette, and computer. If he had guests, they'd visit him in his little studio. His lawyers, therapists, and even a personal trainer had to make do with the small space. If he ever stepped foot outside the embassy, British police officers were front and center, ready to arrest him on the spot for skipping bail. And he would stay trapped in that embassy for 5 years before WikiLeaks released their most damaging data dump yet, all at the cost of the US government's dignity. Julian Assange was a target for the US government under both President Obama and President Trump. He embarrassed the military, showed them how weak their security was, and on March 7, 2017, he released what they called Vault 7, arguably the most embarrassing data leak in the history of the CIA and the US government. What was in Vault 7? All the internal documentation regarding the CIA's ultra-secret hacking division and its tactics. The guys who were supposed to be the best hackers in the world had apparently been hacked. This breach was not just embarrassing, it took away years of agency pride and dignity. The organization tasked with keeping America's secrets couldn't even stop a leak of their most classified information. Vault 7 had it all. Details on electronic surveillance equipment, cyber warfare weapons, and how they could break into almost every cell phone operating system on the planet. All out in the open for the world to see. Agency officials used to quote, laugh about WikiLeaks, end quote, mocking the State Department and the Pentagon for allowing so much material to escape their control. But now, it was their turn. And for the CIA, revenge wasn't even a question, it was the only answer. Their blood was boiling and all they could see was red. An example had to be made, and the main targets? Of course, it was Julian Assange. On April 13, 2017, the CIA director at the time, Mike Pompeo, was on a warpath. Less than 5 weeks after Vault 7's publication, Director Pompeo made his new stance very clear. WikiLeaks was now a full-blown, non-state hostile intelligence service and a direct enemy of the United States.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service, and has encouraged its followers to find jobs at the CIA in order to obtain intelligence. It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is. A non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia.
This new classification was bureaucratic speak that now justified the use of offensive measures against this non-state hostile intelligence service. The fight was on, and according to Mike Pompeo, there were no rules. After his speech, he gave CIA officers the order to figure out the, quote, art of the possible, end quote. He said, quote, nothing's off limits. Don't self-censor yourself. I need operational ideas from you. I'll worry about the lawyers in Washington, end quote. Which led to all the insane plans we talked about at the start of this video. Despite all the planning though, their plans never went forward because their lawyers said it would be a bad idea. And it wasn't because they thought let's not kill a guy who hasn't even been proven guilty of the crime. No, they didn't do it because the lawyers in Washington said it wasn't a good idea. So even though Assange escaped becoming the next name scratch off the CIA's hit list, life wasn't going so well for him at the same time either. Spending more than 6 years as a guest in someone's house seems like a bit much, so it wasn't totally surprising when the Ecuadorians finally started getting tired of Assange in 2018. Apparently, he refused to clean up after his cat Michi, also known as the embassy cat, and started getting on the nerves of the Ecuadorian government by posting damaging information about the new Ecuadorian president, Lenin Moreno, on WikiLeaks. At least you can't say WikiLeaks is biased. Exposing your host and leaving your cat's poop all over the place doesn't seem like the best way to stay in someone's good graces. So in July 2018, President Moreno said he wanted Assange out as soon as it was safe for him to leave. In October that same year, Assange tried suing the Ecuadorian government for cutting his internet access and threatening to turn him over to the UK police. Pretty odd, and things only went downhill from there. It turns out that UC Global, the company the embassy paid to keep Assange safe, had been spying on him for US intelligence all along. The same company the embassy paid more than $5 million to over the last 7 years. Assange had become more trouble than he was worth, and the embassy was about to cut him off. On April 2, 2019, President Lenin Moreno announced Assange was no longer welcome at the embassy. The reason? It had everything to do with Assange violating the terms of his asylum, and had nothing to do with the fact that WikiLeaks had published pictures that linked Moreno to a corruption scandal. Assange had very little time to prepare when 9 days later, the Ecuadorian government invited British police into the embassy to arrest Assange on the basis of skipping bail. That very same day, Assange was found guilty and sentenced 50 weeks in prison starting May 1st. The US's time had come. Assange had been secretly indicted over a year earlier in March 2018, and on the same day he was arrested in London, the indictment was unsealed. He was charged with conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. A month later, while serving his sentence in the Belmarsh prison, the US added 17 charges to the list. The maximum sentence? 170 years in prison. 170 years for the leader of an organization that wasn't all that different from other news agencies that published leaks. At his extradition hearing in May 2019, Assange said, quote, "I do not wish to surrender myself for extradition for doing journalism that has won many, many awards and protected many people," end quote. On July 4, 2021, a judge denied the extradition request on the basis of Assange's mental health making him a suicide risk, but he was also denied bail because he's a flight risk. So for now, Assange hangs in limbo. Julian Assange is currently still in Belmarsh prison at the time of recording this video. If he's extradited, he faces solitary confinement in a supermax prison, 170 years in prison for someone who did the same job as most journalists out there. Where I wouldn't be surprised if he met the same fate as our friend whose first name starts with a J and last name starts with an E. Time will tell what the future holds for the whistleblower pioneer.
For humiliating both our elected leaders and the media class, Julian Assange's life has been destroyed.
What I think he's done is spoken truth to power. That should not be a basis on which you end up in prison.
Ultimately, he should come back to this country to face trial. I think he should be punished.
When China demands the extradition of a Canadian journalist, what happens when Saudi Arabia does the same thing about someone living in Argentina? We are setting a precedent right now that we are going to live with for the next 100 years.
If you are new here, we make video essays, documentaries just like this one every single week on the most provocative stuff in the world of money, power, war, and crime. So if you like this one, you're definitely gonna like the other one, so click that red subscribe button below. And if you want more day in the life kind of stuff, you can follow me on Instagram at jaketrend.io. Thanks for being part of the Watch to the End Club. Keep sharpening that mind, stay dangerous out there, and I will see you guys in the next one.